Hello, English 240, 103 online African American students. It's been a little while since my last instructional video, um, and I'm in yet a different space. This is my living room, so welcome to my home. A couple of things I thought I might mention, and I sent out an announcement saying that I was a little disappointed that in the lack of participation in the discussion boards are not worth a great deal individually, but over time, they add up. And I wasn't trying to make anybody feel bad. I'm just trying to say, hey, look, don't let easy points slip off the board for you. Discussion boards are a fairly easy way to get credit in this class. Just show me that you're reading. Make sure you contribute something new. That is something I want you guys focusing on, not just parroting what a previous person said in a previous post, but actually contributing something new. And I will say that one thing I really want to see you looking for is struggling with the actual language. Don't just summarize. Don't just give me an opinion that could have been written after a quick glance at a study guide. Quote the author and wrestle with the text a little bit. You'll find that it complicates your responses in interesting ways. Your job as a literary scholar, and I guess that to some degree is what you are if you're analyzing literature, is not to simplify a text, but to explore its complexities. So, and your answer doesn't have to be right, and I don't have to agree with you. It just has to be interesting and original, which is a hard thing, but do your best. This week, we're going to be talking about Richard Wright, and in particular, The Man Who Was Almost a Man. And it's actually a really good writer to follow up. A lot of you struggled with the character, True Blood. And I get that. True Blood was a really complicated character, and actually Ellison got a lot of criticism for even creating him, because True Blood seems to represent all of these stereotypes of African American men: violent, hypersexualized, animalistic. But I think Ellison's larger point there is that he's a human being caught in a rather impossible situation, and doesn't justify what he does, if he in fact he does it, because there are some scholars who suggest that True Blood's making the whole story up just to get money and support from the white community. But True Blood is horribly poor, which is why he's in the same bed with his daughter to begin with. He's horribly poor because of the sharecropping economy that he is victimized by, and he's also rejected by his own community. So he's trying to survive in an impossible situation and fails miserably. But Ellison gets hyper criticized for the character of True Blood. And so it is not surprising for me then that he takes up Richard Wright's case. Richard Wright writes a novel called Black Boy about, and in this novel, an African-American man rapes and murders a white woman, which is sort of like the ultimate nightmare of white society. And a lot of critics are very angry at him for creating this character. And but what Ellison recognizes in Wright is he's not trying to. Wright's like not saying that all African American men are violent and hypersexually aggressive. He's trying to expose the world that creates Black Boy, the systematic racism and that surrounds this character, and then creates the very monster it seems to want him to be. Here's Ellison talking about Richard Wright's Black Boy. Perhaps all this, in which lies the very essence of the human, and which Wright takes for granted, has been forgotten because the critics recognize neither Negro humanity nor the full extent to which the Southern community renders the fulfillment of human destiny impossible. And while it is true that Black Boy presents an almost unrelieved picture of a personality corrupted by a brutal environment, it also presents those fresh human responses brought to its world by the sensitive child. So this is, and I couldn't teach you Black Boy because we've got other things to do, just like I couldn't have you do all 450 pages of Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man, because we have other things in contemporary works I'd like to get to. But
Men Who's Almost Men is a very solid sort of microcosm of Richard Wright's work, in that it presents to us a young African American man. He is not a slave, by the way. Please don't call him a slave. We have only looked at one text where there are any slaves in them. All the rest of these works are in the 20th century. Slavery ended with the Civil War in 1865. Maybe not metaphorical slavery or wage slavery or economic slavery, but slavery as it existed in the South ended at the end of the Civil War. So immediately, supplanted and replaced by other equally, well, no, maybe not equally, but pretty oppressive economic systems that continued to oppress minorities in the United States. In particular, sharecropping. Dave is a sharecropper. And Dave is desperate to become a man. Well, why is he desperate to become a man? Because he's always treated like a child. And you can say, well, he acts like a child. But that's the question. Is Dave who he is because he's just a bad person or a bad kid who does bad things and then doesn't want to take responsibility for them? Or is he infantilized by the community that surrounds him, both by his parents and the larger community, that even when he suggests he's a man, laughs at him? And this whole idea that Dave has that to get a gun is to become a man, like that's all he needs to do and that's what he needs to do, well, where does he get that from? What is the constant message that he is given in his world about where you get power and respect living in the 1930s South as an African American man? Well, it's going to be the person who owns the economic strings, and it's the person who has the guns. And if you look at this story through that lens, the story of Dave is a tragedy. He is at the whim and at the mercy of people who would take advantage of him. So this is something that I want you to start thinking about, not just in this story, but as we move forward. What is the relationship between the character and his environment? A couple of things that you might think about. We throw around terms like assimilation. We also throw around a term in the literary world and sociological world called acculturation. Acculturation is how we learn culture. And it starts happening right from the day we're born. Like, it's all of the collected means by which we learn how to behave in the world. It's all the stuff that surrounds us. So that's acculturation, and we are all subject to it. We are subject to these influences. Then we have assimilation. Assimilation is the conscious process by which we try to join a culture. Oftentimes, assimilation means leaving one's own culture behind. But in the case of Dave, he's simply trying to adapt to the culture. He's trying to play by its rules, even as he's breaking them. And we are always, all of us, in this process of being acculturated and assimilating. And so think a little bit about how environment affects and changes and manipulates personality, how it narrows our choices, how it prevents us from getting the kinds of resources, information that we need, or provides it to us. Because really, that's all privilege is. Privilege is access and opportunity. But that's highly environmentally dependent. I have had all the advantages of having access. I didn't grow up wealthy, but I've always had access to everything I need to succeed. Some people have more than I do. Some people have less. Privilege is a sliding scale. But privilege is about access and opportunity. And of course, my gender and my color allows me more access and opportunity. And of course, my regional background affords me more access and opportunity. Dave has no access and opportunity. He can make money, but he can't keep it. He is not respected by anyone in the community. He can't purchase anything without asking for permission for it. And he's pretty well trapped, and he's looking for a way out. And if you put a human being in a box, they're going to try to find a way to get out of it. All right, that's all I have to say about this piece for today. But I hope you take into consideration some of these factors that are playing on Dave into consideration when we look at other texts that we'll be reading moving forward in this semester. Great. Thank you very much. I hope you all do well and take care of yourselves and be healthy.